In this video, we'll be talking about what a gap year is, should you take one, will it benefit you, and many other things. We'll delve into the pros and cons that come with taking an entire year off, and what kinds of things you should be doing during that year if you choose to take one. Just as a disclaimer, I personally did take a gap year before starting medical school, and while I will try my best to present the information in a non-biased way, I do tend to advocate for taking a gap year since I think it is beneficial. So, on a bare bones level, a gap year is just a period of time when a student can take a break from studying and focus on other things. But why should you consider doing this before medical school after you finish undergrad? Well, because it might be a chance for you to stand out among your peers. We will go into more details later in this video on how you can do so, but just know for now that a big motivator behind taking a gap year is to bolster your application. Also, you aren't limited to just 1 year either. In fact, there was a study done by AAMC in 2020 and found that almost half of med applicants had either a 1 or 2 year gap between graduating college and starting medical school. But why would almost 50% of people want to take a gap year? Doesn't it make sense to keep the momentum going after college, and won't schools think worse of you if you take a break? We will get to all these questions, but before we dive into the specifics, I will quickly show you some of the motivators behind taking a gap year. This is also so you can have some of these things in the back of your mind as we continue through this video, in case if any of these reasons catch your eye. Now, whenever you are asked, do you want to hear the good news or the bad news first, most people tend to say the bad news so that the good news will be fresh in their mind and will hopefully make the bad news seem a bit better. So, in that spirit, I'll first talk about some of the cons or worries that applicants have when they are considering taking a gap year, and then follow it up with all of the benefits it may have for you. So, after talking with a lot of my peers during the application process, and even when I was getting to know my classmates in medical school, the two biggest reasons I heard for why they didn't want to take a gap year was because they felt it would delay their career and that they would lose momentum if they took a break. These are fairly subjective worries, so it's hard to objectively approach them. But they absolutely have merit, since even though I ended up taking a gap year, I was very concerned about these two things. First off, let me clarify that everyone is different. If you are someone that feels they would lose a ton of motivation to study hard if you took a year off, or you want to get your MD as soon as possible because all your friends are already deep into their careers and you're worried about being left behind, then maybe a gap year isn't for you. I do want to reassure you, though, that each and every one of us are different and the path we take through life won't be the same. So don't let external worries influence your decision here. Make it all about you. What would be best for you? And if you decide that taking a gap year isn't worth it, then that's totally fine. Another challenge with taking a gap year is any financial challenges that may come with it. We all know how expensive school is, unfortunately, and if you aren't really in a position where you can afford to spend more money on activities during a gap year, going straight into medical school might be your best option. There might actually also be scholarship opportunities with some schools that specifically require you to go straight into medical school. So it's important that you check all of the financial aid and scholarship opportunities for the schools you apply to. Finally, the last big worry that some people have is that taking a gap year may make you look bad as an applicant. These can be thoughts like, that school may not think I'm committed if I take a year off of studying, and to be perfectly honest, that's entirely possible. I am sure that some very specific schools out there do want to see their incoming medical students coming straight from undergrad. But here's where we can transition into why gap years might work for you and not against you. The vast majority of schools would respect you for taking the time to commit yourself to personal growth, real-world experience, or making yourself a more competitive applicant. It comes down to how you are spending this gap year. So, the answer to whether a school might look negatively at a gap year is really, it depends. As long as you use the time productively, it will most likely work in your favor and not against you. The biggest pro of taking a gap year is that it gives you a chance for personal growth. Maybe you feel like you aren't quite ready to make the massive commitment of starting medical school and you feel you need to mature a bit more. Maybe you feel like if you took a year to try and grow as a person, schools might be more attracted to you. Whatever the reason, Taking that extra year gives you the opportunity to grow, something that you will continue doing throughout your medical career. Another reason to take the gap year would be for the experiences and connections you can build. Even if they aren't necessarily associated with the school you'll be going to, every experience and every connection matters. I can say, without a doubt, that I met my biggest mentor during my gap year, and it completely changed my perspective on things. And even though he isn't at my school, I still go by a lot of his advice to this day. Also, maybe you want to experience other cultures before committing yourself to being in the same place for another 4 years. Real-world experiences are just as important, and gap year is a great time to have those. Now, one reason that might really attract you, given all the stress I'm sure you're having, is to reduce burnout. Having to juggle the MCAT while simultaneously trying to make perfect grades in undergrad and be involved with tons of research is just a lot. And I know you might be having some feelings of burnout or asking yourself if the struggle is worth it. Then take a gap year. It's an excellent time to collect yourself and get remotivated before you start medical school. And finally, if you're considering taking a gap year, I bet it'll mainly be because you want to strengthen your application. Using all the extra time you have now to pursue things besides just studying in undergrad gives you an awesome opportunity. You can now spend all that time focusing on other aspects of your application that you feel are weak. Let's actually dive into some of the things you could be doing during a gap year and why taking one might be beneficial to you. And I want to start by briefly mentioning a few things that not a lot of people think about when considering a gap year. If you are caught up by a ton of undergraduate studying, extracurriculars, work, whatever it may be, and feel like you won't be able to effectively dedicate enough time towards studying for the MCAT, then taking a gap year relieves some of that pressure. Or, if you didn't do as well on the MCAT that you wanted, a gap year allows you to take it again without having to feel pressed for time with the application coming up. Speaking of which, you could actually use part of the gap year to do the whole application and interview process to get into medical school. If you don't take a gap year, chances are you'll be trying to complete your application during your senior year of college, which might take a toll on you. And I will tell you right now, if you haven't started your application yet, there is a lot of writing that you have to do, and it is very time consuming. Sometimes, people that don't get accepted their first time around end up having to do the application again during a gap year anyways. Also, something different about being a college student is that you are bound to have mandatory events, whether that's like a test or a lab, and getting exemptions so that you can go interview might be challenging. During a gap year, you might have a little bit more freedom with your own schedule. And with all that extra time during a gap year, there are so many things you can do. This list is by no means comprehensive, as anything you find to do that can strengthen yourself or make you a more interesting applicant will end up helping you. Feel like you need a higher science GPA? Take a master's program and use it as an opportunity to raise your GPA. Need money after struggling through college expenses and aren't ready to pay for medical school yet? Get a job. And it can be any job too, it doesn't have to be in healthcare. Want to get more clinical or research experience? Reach out to some local healthcare centers and see if they are looking for clinical research assistants or if any physician in a field you are interested in is offering shadowing hours. Want to do something unique like learn a language or travel the world? Go for it. There are so many unique and interesting things that you can do during a gap year that will make you stand out among your peers. As it happens, only about 30% of the people accepted into medical school are accepted during their first application attempt. A lot of people who are rejected only get in during their next try because they took time to do things that a gap year would have provided. Potentially, if they had just taken the gap year in the first place, their chances of getting in the first time around might have gone up. Oh, and they wouldn't have had to pay nearly as much since medical school applications tend to get expensive the longer the process goes on. Say you are someone who didn't get accepted during your first go, reach out to the schools that you applied to and see what weak points they tell you about your previous application. They will actually do that. To close, I will give some of my biased thoughts coming from someone who just went through the application process. Not only did I take a gap year, but a large majority of my class did as well. Here's the thing. As time goes on, more and more people are applying into medical school. Those tiny acceptance percentages you see are only going to get smaller. And guess what? Just about everyone is making really good grades in college and doing fairly well on the MCAT with at least one of their attempts. It is becoming ever more important to make yourself stand out, separate from your GPA and MCAT score. But if you're one of those gifted few that made a near-perfect 4.0 and a near-perfect MCAT, maybe you won't need to take a gap year and can think about some of the reasons why not to take one. I'll end this video with what a physician that sits on an admissions board once told me. If I had to pick between two applicants, one with a perfect GPA and MCAT score, and the other with average grades, average MCAT score, but has extensive experience outside of college and has shown commitment towards growing themselves, I would choose the second applicant in a heartbeat.